So if anybody in the audience wants to say things, yeah, Antoine, you're very in.
Sure, it's great to be here. And I wish it could have been at the Café du Village in Balazuc, behind a bottle of wine. But yeah, I didn't prepare any remarks, but everyone's been very eloquent, and I think we have an inspiring subject to talk about. So yeah, but I just wanted to say thank you to John as well. I came to Yale. What was it, in 2008? I think I'm probably, I guess, among the latest grad students you had. I think, Miranda, you came a couple years after me, but hi, Maddie. Okay, and and I don't know how I ended up at Yale. I come from France. I mean, am I the only French person in here? I don't know. Well, I'm not even really French. I'm Belgian. So, I studied in Paris, and I studied philosophy and the social sciences, and I don't know how I ended up applying to Yale in history, just les hasards de la vie, but as soon as I came, John was just incredibly supportive, and I had a kind of different trajectory. My English was quite dubious as well, and however, John supported me from the beginning. Also, let me do whatever it is I wanted to do. I didn't have a very clear idea at the time, and John was always very supportive. I think the only, piece of, I don't know if it's criticism, but he read something and say, like, put some more people in there. So, which I'm still trying to do, and okay, but John has been incredibly supportive. I mean, his support has been unstinting and divided. And when I got the job that, I some folks have alluded to this. I think it's a very big part of your life, John, is writing letters for all of us. When I got the job that I have now, one of the people came to, the members of the department that I joined came to see me afterward and say, like, the letter of John Merriman is like the strongest letter I've pretty much ever read in my life. So, in my career as a faculty. So, I didn't really know why I deserved so much support, but it made a big difference. So thanks, John.
I met John when he came to North Carolina. I was a second year grad student, and he was interviewing. He was an assistant professor at Yale, and he was interviewing at North Carolina and would have been my advisor. Instead, he got tenure at Yale. But since then, I think the two things that John and I connect most over is one, our love of provincial France and villages. When I do my research, I stay with a place rented by a French family in a little village not very far from Balazuc. It's about 45 minutes. So I share that same real deep love for getting to know people in a little village, working class village, and my children got to go to school in the region as well. Second thing is our children. Laura and Chris, I hear about you all the time. My kids are about the same age. John talks all the time about a conference in California. Where was it? Lamar. That he always talks about as dreadful because the food was so bad. And I had brought my 11-year-old daughter with me, and have always been touched how interested he was in Sarah, and how nice he was to her, and how every single time I ever see him, he asks me about how she is. He's always wanted Sarah and Laura to get together because Sarah also is in international development and has worked so much in Africa. But in any case, that's one of the things that has always been so nice, how down to earth and loving, and that's always more important to talk about and ask about even than the research, is the children, and making that connection, and always remembering about mine and their names and what they're doing every single time. So thank you, John.
I'm David Barnes. I teach at University of Pennsylvania, and I just wanted to echo what Miranda said about John's passion in the classroom. And Miranda mentioned coming to discussion section at the end of every week, and the students would be on fire after John's lectures, and that was me. I was an undergrad not particularly interested in history. I was interested in France and cities and politics, and before I knew it, I was just enthralled. And John's lectures were legendary. Lindsley Chit 102 was just, you know, the scene of Hurricane John twice a week, and the legendary lecture on, anarchic lecture on anarchism, the 50-minute character assassination of Charles de Gaulle, and many others, the Commune, of course. And I found myself rethinking my career goals, and I looked at John and I thought, how can anyone be that alive and that excited about his work? I want to do that. I want to be that. And several people have already mentioned John's generosity. After I graduated and I was living for a while in Paris and considering applying to graduate school, he was hosting a little reception in his tiny apartment on Rue François Mitterrand, one of the oldest buildings in Paris. And as soon as John found out I was in town, he insisted that I come join all these grad students and professors in French history. And my eyes were wide as saucers, but he didn't bat an eyelash, taking a, you know, recently minted undergrad and treating him as an equal, a colleague in this group of historians. And when I go into the classroom now to teach my undergrads, I try to bring that same passion. And in fact, in my student evaluations every semester, the words that occur most frequently are passion and enthusiasm. And that's in large part because of John's example. And so thank you. And one, many anecdotes to share, but no one's yet mentioned John's habit of remembering telephone numbers by the indicatifs départementaux. And not only had John visited all departmental archives, but he long ago memorized all the indicatifs. And I remember thinking, someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to know them all. And when I finally do, then I will understand France. I never quite made it, but I still find myself occasionally remembering sequences of two-digit numbers by indicatif. So thank you, John, for your shining example. Although I don't see you often or talk often, I think about you all the time, and I wouldn't be where I am if not for your example.
I'm Bob Blackman. I teach at Hampton-Sydney College. And a few years ago, I was going through my things at my parents' house, and I found a letter that John had written me back in 1989. I was a student at UC Riverside with Judy Coffin. I was thinking about graduate school, and she'd said, well, why don't you write a letter to John Merriman? Tell him what you're interested in and see who he thinks you might want to study with. And I did, and he wrote me back this wonderful, long, chatty letter that proved that he knew everyone and everything. And he gave me all kinds of advice about how to go about finding a place in graduate school and what to do when I got there. And I kept that letter. And when I first met John, it was at a meeting of the Western. And I was so interested to meet him. And he immediately, this garrulous, friendly man, treated me as if I'd known him his whole life. And it was he turned into a kind of guardian angel for me over the years. Every time I came to the Western, I could rely on John making me feel good about being part of this profession. And I've tried over the years to bring that forward to my own students and to the people I meet at the conferences I go to try and be like John, to be welcoming of everyone to the profession, and to really try and help make this a better place for all of us. Thank you, John.
So, yeah, I'm going to say something. Thank you guys so much for being here, it means so much to my dad. He's been so excited for weeks and months, just planning every single logistic imaginable as he does. But two things that I'd like to talk about are just how incredibly lucky Chris and I have been to be able to travel so much with my father and mother. And Chris will probably remember as well how much we hated going. They wanted to visit every single Romanesque church possible. And Chris and I, so we drove all over France in numerous car trips, fighting in the back seat, and sometimes refusing to go into the church often, I think, Chris. Yeah, and all the Michelins and just everything. And then since that, as we got older, I think that my father's love of France and how his famous stories of sleeping in the train station once a week in Limoges so he could save money on the hotel, because he would get there at 3 a.m. and then just sleep on the bench until his hotel opened on Mondays. I think those stories really inspired Chris and I then to want to go to Africa, and our parents were incredibly generous to meet up with us and go to Dogon country in Mali, and this past year go to India, to Varanasi, which kind of traumatized my dad, but I had warned him that it would be a lot. But he's always up for going wherever, and even the Maldives, where he had a traumatic experience cutting his finger on a piece of coral, and then he was done with the Maldives. But we've just been incredibly lucky, and seeing Charles in Vietnam, and the way that he, many of you spoke about generosity, and the way that he just, his own generosity created so many pockets of families for us throughout the world, and with Judy and Willie and Austin and Balazouk. And that's the second part that I wanted to talk about, is just the sense of community that he created for us in Balazouk, and that's very much our home, and where we've known people our entire lives, much like he's known many of you just throughout milestones and generations of people and close friends. And we've been, I think, incredibly lucky that because that's how my father is with people, that we've been able to benefit so much from that in return. So that's what I wanted to say.
Someone mentioned my father being open-minded, and I was talking to someone recently about kind of after I graduated from college, like not really knowing what I wanted to do. I ended up joining the Peace Corps, and it was just funny because I feel like a lot of my friends in college, they just kind of went to law school, went to med school because like that's what their parents wanted them to do. And so for me, kind of talking, related back to what my sister was saying, when I told my parents I'm going to the Peace Corps, I'm going to go live in West Africa, they were just like, great, awesome. And I think that's not like a common reaction. But yeah, just, having my dad's support, although I think he's still hoping that I'm going to become a PhD history student. That ship might have sailed, but there's always time. But yeah, just my dad being so supportive of me and my sister, and being so open-minded, and really kind of letting us kind of chart our own path in life, and knowing that we'll have his full support no matter what. Has been super important for me, and thanks to everyone for being here, and thanks to you guys for organizing this.
Thanks, Miranda. I'm Dan Sherman, and I'm actually speaking in the second panel honoring John this after lunch. Just as a PS to what David was saying, some of us had to learn all the departments and their indicatif for our orals. it was soothing. I would spend half an hour memorizing, the A's after a long day of actually reading. It's a good way to fall asleep. Believe it or not, there are aspects of what John gave all of us that haven't been mentioned. And it occurred to me, I wanted to mention how open he was to interdisciplinarity before it was a thing. I had Bob Herbert, an art historian and dear friend of John's, on my committee. I had a very interdisciplinary topic. There was never any question that that was something that historians could and should do. And, I think that it's something that and I know that it's continued. I've had friends who've joined the Yale faculty in other departments, and if they were interested in France, John was interested in them. And a lot of the stories that David Bell and other people have told about being welcomed in a sometimes unwelcoming place are still being told. So, thank you, John.
Well, I also want to add my deep gratitude to John. And I wanted to share one anecdote that happened recently. A lot of people have talked about aspiring to be as passionate in the classroom as John is. And this is also something that, I want to communicate that passion to my students, just as John communicated that to me. And I knew that I had succeeded in some sense in sort of in really emulating John's style in the classroom when in a student exam, I came across the phrase, I think they must have been writing an answer about a question about 1848 or maybe the Commune, but I came across the phrase, the forces of order came in and crushed them like grapes. And this is something that John says in his classrooms. I hadn't realized that I had said that until the student produced this on an exam essay. And so, okay, now I know that I really am emulating John because I'm saying these Johnisms in class and don't even realize it. So thank you, John, for your inspiration.
Yeah.
I think I only took 2 minutes earlier, so listening to everybody has been very moving, but about 13 years ago, I had the chance to go and spend a couple of days in Balazouk with John. John was there by himself. It was March, hardly anybody in the village, and one evening, the second evening, I think, that we were together, we went to dinner at the home of Chris and Laura's teacher. And we had gigot. It was the second time that day that we had gigot. It's the only time in my life that I've had gigot twice in the same day at different people's houses. But we sat and talked, and John, and I don't remember the name of the remarkable fellow that we were sharing a meal with, but they talked about the students that they'd both known. They talked about Chris and Laura. They talked about the village. Like any Frenchman of a certain age, he was missing a couple of teeth. But at the end of the meal, I just thought, geez, I just sat spending time with a one-room schoolhouse French teacher having a fascinating conversation with a sterling professor of history at Yale University. And I don't know that there's any other Yale professor who could have had that conversation and put as much into it and appreciated as much as John clearly did that night what this man had done for his kids and for the other kids of Balazouk. It was really a special night.
Well, I think that we've had a wonderful, wonderful session here today with John and with everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here and for sharing their memories. We will have many opportunities through the rest of the weekend to do so. Please join us this afternoon for the research panel in honor of John Merriman. It's going to be a very special panel. Thank you. It's the third session. Yeah, the third session. Yeah, after lunch. Thank you, everyone.